Usually it's warts and all here at the studio, but for this video, I did not want to dwell on the early stages of this piece. I won't go into details, since that would just irritate me all over again. Nobody wants to be around tetchy Irene. That's when the real snark comes out. And gaining a reputation for being family unfriendly while temptingly edgy is not part of the Inkworks agenda. Suffice to say, mistakes were made, and Gouache was brought in to try and salvage the piece. I'm reminded of an old episode of, I think it was House Hunters. The wife had a laundry list of requirements, such as a covered front porch, hardwood floors, and a walk-in closet. The husband wanted one thing only, and that was a gas stove in the kitchen. Following the usual formula, the first two properties they looked at were aggravatingly inadequate. Well, the third home hit all the marks, except for one, resulting in the wife growling, "Nobody cares about your gas stove." Yeah, that was brutal. Why am I bringing it up? Not sure, really. Perhaps because I sometimes wonder if I overshare, leaving myself open to a "nobody cares about your gas stove" moment. I'll talk about the tools in a bit. First, I want to explain the concept for this piece. The idea was to write a letter, but in an artsy way. That's why there's a border with a figure off to the side, leaving an open space for the writing to come later. With the first applications of gouache, I was beginning to feel better about the piece. This is only the third, is it? Really? It's the third time I've worked with gouache, and I'm not one to rush headlong into relationships, but I'm already enamored with this medium. And I feel a little guilty about it. I mean, my watercolors are now mostly stashed away, so they can't witness all the time I've been spending with gouache lately. I used some of my favorite watercolor brushes from Princeton, specifically an Aqua Elite quarter-inch stroke and two Neptune rounds in sizes 4 and 2. They worked great on this project, but I'd still like to get another flat brush, perhaps a shader or a filbert. Yeah, I've always liked the marks that flat brushes make, and who wouldn't want to use a tool called a filbert? Makes me salivate just saying it. By the way, producer Mike has gas stove on his dream home wish list. I've never used one. Growing up, we had electric coils on our stove, and let me tell you, it was super awkward toasting marshmallows on chopsticks without either the marshmallow or the chopstick getting scorched beyond repair, or even catching on fire. My technique was get in and get out before too much damage was done, because I'd seen what could happen with the low and slow approach, namely that the marshmallow tended to fall off and muck up the burner, which meant Mom had to run in and clean up the mess, all the while mumbling, "You stupid kids." Good times. Since I wasn't changing the background, it simplified things, so I spent time on detailing the foreground. Well, detailing. It was still pretty loose here, but things tighten up later on, especially when defining the shapes by emphasizing the line work. At this point, I was having a blast just laying down strokes of color. My first awareness of gouache as an art medium was by way of mid century advertisements and illustrations. That's a bit before my time, but when I was a kid, our neighbors dropped off a stack of boxes containing old magazines and paperbacks, mainly from the 1950s and 60s. My family was grateful for the reading material, but I was fascinated by the commercial art found inside and out, and the prevalent medium appeared to be gouache. The recent gouache content here on this channel has generated some super helpful viewer comments. Many thanks, guys. You've been informative and encouraging for a gouache newbie like me. I expect others are reading and benefiting as well. Speaking of others, you know who you are. That's right, I'm addressing those silent lurkers. I get it. You just want to watch some paint action in peace. As a fellow introvert, I understand. But can you do a gal a favor and hit like and subscribe? No one needs to know. No one outside of YouTube's fearsome demigods, Analyticus and Algorithmius, anyway. But more importantly, my well wishes go to our viewers currently suffering through a heat wave in Texas. Yeah, that state is known to get hot, but this is extreme even for them. Take care, guys. Hope you cool down soon. Not here exactly, but there was a point where I spent quite a bit of time on the face. I removed much of that footage since it was fussy and tedious. I imagine the woman in this painting is related to some sort of fairy folk. So perhaps she's in a grove waving farewell to a group of pixies. With that pose, though, it's more of a toodles. I'm not much of an outdoorsy person, but that doesn't stop me from daydreaming about loading up a van, driving to a campsite, pitching a tent, and grilling some kebabs. That's an experience I've never had, so I live vicariously through YouTube. I like the Asian camp tubers. They have cool gear that they fit, all Tetris-like, inside their cars, including a firebox stove, Wagyu beef, and about 6 layers of bedding. I've had some people tell me that's not camping, that's glamping. At what point does that happen? Is it when you drape strings of lights? Is it when you bring your bedroom slippers along? Or is it when you project a movie onto the side of your tent? From a creator standpoint, I assume it's a tempting niche, just from affiliate income alone. I mean, if you think art supplies are pricey, take a look at outdoor stuff like double-layer tents and portable generators. But I was still surprised recently to see so many channels dedicated to this activity. My favorite, the one I've been watching for about 5 years, is called Kina Kanbu. They show scenery, camp setup, meal prep, but most importantly, beagles. Yeah, I have a soft spot for beagles, and I think of Kina Kanbu as the Japanese Camping Beagles channel. Producer Mike and I had a beagle named Chloe. I should say she came with him, and I got to spend about 10 years with her. Before that, I'd never considered myself a dog person. I'd been fearful of them since in childhood I'd once witnessed a school friend get chased and bitten. It was our fault, really, since we'd been trespassing. But after that incident, I'd kept my distance until Chloe, because I immediately fell in love with her. Since then, I've been a dog lover and a beagle adorer. Chloe's been gone for 4 years, and now I watch movies like Underdog, the Shiloh trilogy, Isle of Dogs, and A Dog's Purpose. That last one got me twice, since it wasn't until I was bawling my eyes out 2/3 of the way in that I remembered crying to those scenes before. This piece is green heavy because I like green, but it also ties into the magical lore thing, since it brings to mind nature and elemental earth spirits. How many shades of green do we have there? I count 5 or 6. That's including those chartreusey and swampy greens. Back to the subject of fairies. Many years ago, I was gifted a copy of Lady Cottington's Fairy Album. It's by Brian Froud and filled with artwork that's both whimsical and macabre. Yeah, no, don't go into it thinking it's a cute kid's book, because it's not. Froud is a name that's known to fans of fantasy since way back in the 1970s. That was when he teamed with Alan Lee for the art book Fairies. But he's likely better known to younger fans for his influence on and involvement with the 1980s films The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. I love my copy of Lady Cottington's Fairy Album, but it's sort of a companion piece to the previous Lady Cottington's Pressed Fairy book, which I'd enjoyed on loan from my library. And I understand there's even a third volume, Lady Cottington's Pressed Fairy Letters. And that's how you take an idea and run with it. Nobody cares about your fairy book. I feel lucky to have been surrounded by fantasy art books from illustrative artists such as Brian Froud, Frank Frazetta, Jeffrey Jones, and Bern Hogarth, as well as more mainstream artists like Maxfield Parrish, N.C. Wyeth, and Andrew Loomis. When I was very young, I felt naughty for sneaking into my older brother's room and flipping through his art books. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I realized he was quite happy to share his collection. What do you know? I love walking into a home that's filled with living greenery. As a longtime plant killer myself, being able to lounge amongst Boston ferns or Dracaena trifasciata is a rare treat. In fact, having a conservatory or sunroom is a dream of mine, which is weird considering the efforts I go through to avoid the sun. Still, wouldn't a gray, drizzly day be perfect in such a space? So, while the first stage of this piece is something I'd like to forget, the switch to gouache got me excited again, and from then on, I had fun with the painting process. I haven't been a fan of Arch's hot-pressed watercolor paper, and this project has not changed my mind, at least when it comes to watercolors. So far, gouache has worked fine on my go-to papers. Of course, I'd love to try other options too, at some point. But can I just briefly bring up the color on my nails? I don't normally go in for fancy nail lacquers since I can sometimes find a decent bottle at Dollar Tree, but this showed up in my holiday stocking last December. The color is London Fog and it's from Butter London. I like a good gray, mostly because with lighter shades, application errors aren't as noticeable. London Fog makes me fear for my life as I walk the city streets, expecting the Ripper to strike again. This is a Koi watercolor brush pen. It's from a set of 6 shades of gray that I'd received from my sister a while back. I've used them on a number of projects and figured the soft gray color would suit the writing. And it did. The color looks great there. The tip, however, is quite flexible and was not a good match for the tight writing style I used for the body of the letter. Then again, illegible script is part of the fun of letters. Wait, is she having a great day or a grand baby? This correspondence began last February when I dipped my toe into the annual IncoWrimo challenge. A number of viewers responded by sending lovely letters and packages, a longtime supporter, Alistair, being one. I've found that writing letters can be an impetus for arting. In the case of this piece, the motivation was there, but the execution threw me for a loop. Early on, I felt frustrated that it wasn't looking anything like how I'd imagined. But coming at it from an alternate angle, with gouache, infused the process with new energy, resulting in a piece that I'm delighted with. I'm happy to share this experience. Until next time, remember that somebody out there cares about what nobody else cares about, like concept sketches. And stay artsy, my friends.